interested in some of the visual language in this film. There's a lot of moments where we, or the camera, is quite a long way away. We've got a lot of long shots here.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your choices of shot sizes in particular.
For me, there's always something. I used to, before 9/11, we were able to just walk into the airport willy-nilly, if you will. And I used to love to just take myself to the airport and sit in the cafes by the gates and watch people traveling, saying goodbye to each other, greeting one another, and just that human behavior. And there's always a sort of a distance to it, and it's a very voyeuristic look at things, and people seem smaller and slightly more precious. So there's a lot of that. There's my fondness for observing others, and it also lets you get away a little bit in something that's intensely claustrophobic like this. So there's a lot of value for me in creating a distance, and often Bob is far away from us, and that helps us feel that he's smaller, even though he's this huge personality, that he's still somewhat small and childlike.
Yeah. Why did you choose Vincent D'Onofrio for the role, and how did you go about casting him?
Vincent is such a genius. I mean, he's, in my opinion, one of the most underrated actors and underused actors in all of Hollywood. I fell in love with him as a performer instantly when I saw Full Metal Jacket. He really affected me. I mean, his work in that is some of my favorite parts of that entire film. And I also, spent a great deal of my life watching him on Law & Order: Criminal Intent. And I think he's just not just a chameleon, but he's always genuinely whatever character he sets out to be. In The Cell, he was that man. In Law & Order, he was this sort of Columbo meets a strangely arrogant, wounded guy. And I thought, what Bob needed to be was an everyday kind of fellow with this incredible wound inside him, and he's got that ability. So I think that some of the people I was working with when I brought him up thought, isn't he too TV? And I just thought, no, people take all sorts of jobs to pay their bills, and also TV is now a whole nother world, so no one is too TV for me. But we got him the script, and less than 2 days later, he called me up, and we had a great conversation. By the end of it, he said, "I really want to do this," and I said, "Great, let's make a movie." It was incredibly simple, and I'm so grateful to him for that, because he really saw the character and was willing to go there and trusted me in ways that I could never thank him enough for.
Can you just say a little bit about the writing processes that you go through? Because obviously you say yesterday with Chained that you were given the script, or you were given the story.
Right.
And then obviously you go over and write the script, and you said that you changed parts of the story. What are the processes that you go through? Because you wrote Surveillance as well, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
So what are the processes that you go through when you kind of sit down and go, right, this is the story, let's write?
A lot of, I write, I don't know if this is strange because I'm not sure exactly how everybody else writes. I'm sure it's individual, but for me, there's a lot of writing in just doing everyday things. I'm writing while I'm doing the dishes, I'm writing while I'm walking the dog, I'm writing while I'm driving to a meeting. And that creates this sort of welling up of ideas and almost a nausea, and then for 2 or 3 days I just throw it all up. I tend to write in a giant burst after having let it soak and marinate for a while. And the reason it's always weird to me when people say, "But you're a girl, why are you doing these dark things?" is because I'm not walking around consciously as a female all the time. I'm just walking around as Jen, the person. And I approach every character in just a human way. I mean, yes, I'm writing men as men and girls as girls, but to me, the best part of all of us as human beings is how we are, hopefully, female and male at times. That there is a softness which we genuinely attribute to women, and a strength that we genuinely attribute to men. So it's, a perfect partner for me, and a perfect friend to communicate with is someone who's a little bit of both and has that willingness and fearlessness when it comes to being strong or soft. So I sort of approach it as, what would I do in this situation? I mean, as bad as that may sound to certain people, much like they say dreams are, everything is an aspect of yourself. All of these characters and everything I do are basically me if I were in that situation. You know, if I had been this abused child in the way that Bob was abused, and now I was faced with this as a life, how would I behave? What's my damage? And then therefore, how do I act?
You're thinking about what you're saying there about, you know, people and humanity as a group. There's some images and ideas here about that, aren't there? And about treating people like they're not people. I mean, even the name
Yes.
rabbit and so on. Talk to me a little about your thinking there.
You know, one of the things that I guess is part of the mental culture with someone being kidnapped or people taking children away is that they remove their genuine history and objectify them or change their name. And I thought it was important that, and it was this one of my favorite parts of the original script that Damien O'Donnell wrote was that he calls the boy Rabbit. I always wanted to call the movie Rabbit, and I shot it with that title. The distributors didn't like that title. Said they didn't know how to sell a film called Rabbit, but I think it's creepier and stranger to call it Rabbit. Chained sounds more like a Saw or Hostel to me, and that's not what this film is, but I didn't win that battle. When it comes to, they always say, you know, if you're a mother pleading for your child's life, talk about what they do, talk about their age, humanize them to the person who has them, in case they're listening. That whole idea of that is examined in Bob taking away Tim's name and calling him Rabbit, this small animal, you know, and when Angie is kidnapped, she identifies herself right away. I'm Angie. I'm 18. You know, like just giving herself some human existence, so she's not just an object to be killed. And then this negotiation begins where she thinks it must be about sex. It must be about, here, then I'll offer this. Just spare me my life. And all those sort of traditional things that were advised. And it was brought up in Silence of the Lambs as well, you know, when the mother speaks to the killer. You want to negotiate and you want to humanize, because then hopefully they won't see you as something to be killed, as some sort of bug or animal, but as someone like them.
So were you quite consciously trading in convention then, would you say?
I was, yeah, I mean, I think that you have to in those situations, because it is a movie too, ultimately. You want to add whatever the collective consciousness is about how would you deal with this. You know, how do you, because suddenly you're in this situation and you've got to preserve yourself. So what are my bargaining tools? Angie has sex and a humanizing thing. And Tim, you know, or Rabbit, pretty quickly is told, this, you now have a new name and your mother's never coming back. So this is your job. And within that, he has to make certain choices. So there's a different kind of negotiation for him, but at every opportunity I wanted to give the audience a chance to somehow be involved in, you know, we got to get out of here.
Would you say you were leveraging a lot of other conventions at times? I'm thinking in particular the way that the flashbacks was shot and presented was evocative of how we're used to seeing that sort of material.
Yeah, and and there was you know, a lot of discussion about that, and I wanted to treat it as traditionally as I could, because I think I'm asking a lot of the audience as far as tolerance and new ideas and a weird kind of patience to stay there and sit and witness this kind of treatment and feel this kind of tension. So a traditional handling of a flashback would be more palatable to them as far as getting across the humanity of, and humanity, interesting term, I mean the wound of this monster, you know.
You mentioned earlier that people are surprised at you being a woman and writing dark material. At FrightFest 2012, we had 2 films that were written and directed by women, 2 of the best films at the festival. But not just in the horror genre, but just overall. Why do you think there are so few women filmmakers, and what can we do to get more women putting their stories on screen?
I think we just need to keep encouraging storytellers, because they're out there, men and women. I mean, I'm happy to see any great story, especially stories that don't occur to me. That's exciting to me. I want to see as much and hear as much from other people as I can. That's, if I just listen to myself, that's not very exciting. So I think that it's not even reaching out to more women as much as just, there should be no gender specification to storytelling. It's, directors are human beings. Some have, jump in the front and some don't.
Well, why do you think there are so few women directors?
I don't
Are
have
there
any
barriers?
idea. Are they embarrassed?
Are there any barriers to women?
Oh, are there barriers? In thinking about that, maybe, as an example, maybe I would have won the argument of calling the film Rabbit if I had a penis. Who knows? Maybe I would have been able to keep certain parts of the original edit if I had a penis. I don't know. There shouldn't be barriers. I don't think there are any conscious barriers to women making films. I think that maybe that's a supposed thing in society for the women themselves, thinking, oh, I can't do that.
It seems from just the trailer of Despite the Gods that you were actually facing exactly sexism and problems with you. I mean, I know it's a different case because it's a specific culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more a cultural thing than a sexism thing.
Right.
And yet there is sexism in that caste system in India. So, but ultimately, and hindsight being 20/20, as easy as it would be for me to say, oh, it's because I was a girl that it ended up, they took it away from me and made a film that's not my film. In truth, I really think it was a personality clash, and very fear-based on the part of the producers, that there was a sudden terror that they had to admit they hired me to make this movie when they were hoping I would make the movie they wanted me to make. And they should have just made the movie they wanted to make. So it's and Despite the Gods, it's an incredible example of, yes, but that, again, I think it was more cultural and more actually just, the one producer and myself, him having to face that he'd hired me, and that he could have been more conscious of that. I mean, I was making the film I wrote, and the film I thought we both agreed was going to be made. Penis vagina,
Of your films, I mean, do you feel, it's a question of ownership really, what sort of ownership do you feel of the films you've made? It sounds like here's just something that you don't feel is...
It's not my movie at all.
Not at all?
Not at all. I shot for 9 months in India, over 9 months in India. We weren't shooting the whole time, obviously. There were catastrophes left and right that made us push and stuff. But ultimately, the footage was taken away from me and cut and color timed and scored and created. And they somehow felt it was appropriate to leave my name on it as if it would help sell it. I have not seen that film. I will never see that film. It is not my film. Probably the greatest loss I've ever experienced. And it's not to compare it to things like death of family members, but as far as something that I worked that hard on and couldn't complete, it was a devastating thing. I proceeded to put on 65 pounds and hide. I liken it to carrying a child for 9 months and developing it, and the second it's about to be born, it's cut out of me, and now I find out years later it's a Kardashian. I've from anybody who cares about me, I've heard only, don't ever see it. They have destroyed your footage. They have destroyed the story. It would kill you. and I don't doubt it. There's a clip in Despite the Gods of what the film looks like, and I just, it breaks my heart. You know, I would have rather failed at making the movie, having made it, than have my name on something that isn't mine.
And how about the rest of your body of work?
I adore the rest of my body of work. It's all, including all the battles I win and lose in an edit. I mean, Surveillance is genuinely my cut and what I wanted to make. I was gifted with the opportunity to really make my film there. And with this one, I was gifted as well. Although I lost like the title battle and certain scenes that I think should be in the film are not in the film. I had a length requirement for the entirety of it. I hope to do a director's cut, but my work is my work and representative of who I was when I made it. So hopefully I'm evolving. But again, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. I'm happy to succeed or fail as long as I've actually done the work. So it's just hard to have something out there that isn't mine with my name on it and have people think, that was what I wanted to say.
With Chained, how much is the original story and how much did you bring in and add to it for the film?
The original story was, a serial killer who drives a taxi cab, picks up the mother and son, kills the mother, keeps the boy for 10 years, and there's the twist at the end.
Yeah.
But the actions and the things that take place within that storyline, like there's your one-liner, and the rest of it was what I incorporated in there. There was a tremendous amount of detectives following the killer around. I'd say, more than a third of the film was these detectives. And then the original murders were he was called the dicer, and he would cut pieces off the women, remove their breasts, and kill them slowly, and it didn't tickle me, you know what I mean? Like there are people who can make films like that and are good at it, and I'm just not that person. I wanted to figure out and play with the psychological idea of who real monsters are, and if we're going to be sitting with a human being who does these terrible things, why would a person do those terrible things? And I'm a big proponent of, people stopping, child abuse and pedophilia, and you can trace back in everybody who's awful to someone that they are afraid or hurt. Nobody's an asshole unless they're scared or hurt. And that doesn't make it okay, but it explains it. And I think if we can start a dialogue about not, raping children and beating children, we'll have less adult monsters who, behave the same way.
Yeah. Why there are a lot of films about serial killers, but why do you think we are so fascinated by them?
Hopefully because they're so different than we are, and because the rest of our lives are devoid of that kind of thought process, and yet maybe all of us fear we could kill someone. And there's some sort of thrill in it, for the same reason that playing cops and robbers as kids is entertaining, because it's fun to dress up and be something you're not,
I just want to ask very quickly.
Last question.
Just very quickly. We've spoken a bit about how, female, male filmmakers, etc., etc. Bit of an odd question, but have you found throughout your career that there's been pressures based on who your dad is?
Yeah, it's what's most interesting about that is that people think, especially when Boxing Elena happened, it was, she wrote the script when she was 19, she's just getting this job because she's David's daughter, and if anything, and proudly I can tell you he says the same thing, it's harder to do something as someone's child. It is, the door may open, but that's because they're curious about you. But you better be really fucking good. You gotta be better than anybody else walking into that room, because the expectation is so high, and they're more ready to hate you than they are to like you. Nobody wants to like the kid of someone else. And if you think about any actor, they get a harder time. Oh, they're nothing like their father. Oh, they're nothing like their mother. It's tougher. The door's open, yes, but again, you're more of an oddity, and the odds are against you more than they are anybody else with an idea who walks into the room. So yeah, it's a different kind of pressure. I mean, the whole gift versus a curse thing comes into play for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, all right, I know we could keep
Thank
talking
you so
forever.
much.
Thank
Thank
you, I
you.
really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lovely to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time.